Mass record. So our next couple of lectures are we're going to go away from the neuromuscular system, and we're going to talk about the cardiovascular and the pulmonary systems. So we're going to start off by doing some basic anatomy and some kind of functional physiology on these systems. And then we're going to stop, we'll have our test, and then we're going to come back and do more on how the cardiovascular and the pulmonary system really are going to be big limiting factors and contributors to aerobic type exercise performance. Okay? So if muscles and the neuromuscular system is the big thing where the changes are going to take place when we do resistance training, then the cardiovascular and the respiratory system are going to be more of where the changes are going to take place in aerobic. Okay, so Dr. Cellular, who is our cardiovascular physiologist in the department, gets mad at me when I say this, but the cardiovascular system in relation to exercise is very important, but it is more of a support system, okay? Its functions serve to support the functions of muscles, mitochondria, and the brain and things that are going on. So if muscles are the things that drive the movement, we have to have proper cardiovascular system function to bring blood and oxygen and glucose and lipids and things that we can use for energy. Okay? So it plays a role in a huge number of functions in the body. We're only going to talk about a very, very select few of them. Okay? Only a very select few. So the cardiovascular system, especially as it relates to endurance type exercise performance, is probably the system that plays the largest role in who's going to win an endurance race, who's going to have the highest VO2 max, who can run the farthest, those kinds of things. Okay? We'll get into the individual cardiovascular variables like heart size and resting heart rate, cardiac output and things that are going to play big roles in all of that. But this is probably the system that's going to be the biggest role in that. And so because of all of that, this is the system where if you run or bike or elliptical or something, this is going to be a system where we're going to see lots and lots of adaptations. Changes in heart size, changes in the number of capillaries, changes in blood vessel size, changes in blood pressure, okay? Additionally, because diseases that affect the cardiovascular system are the leading cause of death, okay, in the US, dysfunction of this system is really bad, okay? So we need to understand what normal function is here, what normal structure looks like, what normal function looks like, so that when you get a disease state, you guys can understand and appreciate what has gone wrong, what should it be doing that it's not. Okay? So that's kind of where we're going to try to get to in the bigger picture with the cardiovascular. Okay. So as I said, there's lots and lots of functions. Delivery is going to be one of the primary ones that we're going to talk about, bringing oxygen from the lungs into the blood and then sending that oxygen out to other tissues, the brain, muscles, okay? That type of stuff. Removal of carbon dioxide and waste products from muscles. These are basically metabolic waste products, okay? So bring oxygen in, remove CO2. It also transports hormones and helps us regulate body temperature and pH. We're really not going to talk about these two at all. We're also not going to talk about its role in immune function. Okay? So we're really going to focus on these first two from a function standpoint. But these other three are very, 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 very important. Okay? They're just kind of beyond the scope of what we have time for. We're going to split the cardiovascular system from an anatomical standpoint into three broad chunks. Okay? We will talk about the heart by itself. We'll talk about blood vessels by themselves, and then we'll talk about blood. Okay, blood is maybe the kind of, if you want to call it a tissue, it is maybe the least appreciated of all of the parts of the cardiovascular system. There's some really unique things about red blood cells and plasma and the ratio of red blood cells to plasma in the blood that play some really fascinating roles in exercise and exercise performance. Okay? So we're going to take each one of these things in turn and get into some details about all of this. Okay. A reminder, this is not anatomy class. Okay? Not anatomy class. All that I want you to know about the structure of the heart is what are the four chambers, and basically what is the movement of blood like through those four chambers, and in each of those chambers, what is the relative level of oxygen in the blood. So right ventricle, right atria, left ventricle, left atria. That's all I want you to know. I want you to know that blood returns from venous circulation with low O2 content to the right atria. Then it goes to the right ventricle. Then it goes to the lungs. It picks up oxygen. It comes back into the left atria, left ventricle, and then out into circulation. That's all you have to know. Okay? You don't have to know the name of the valve. You don't have to know how many flaps there are on the valves. Nothing. You don't have to know the names of coronary arteries or the branches coming off of the aorta. None of that stuff for this particular class. Okay? I just need you to understand the general movement of blood. Okay? So that when we can talk about what's happening at the lungs, and we can talk about what's happening to the O2 and CO2 content in the blood, that you can have kind of a 50,000-foot view of kind of what we're talking about. Okay? Everybody okay with that? I mean, I can make you know more if you really want to talk about chord A, tendon A, and all of the other kind of little things in the heart. We can do that, but it's really not kind of that pertinent to this class. Okay? All right, so that's kind of what's happening there. I do want you to know a little bit more detail about cardiac muscle fibers. Okay? So the heart is a muscle. It's a muscle. It is made up of muscle fibers that we call cardiac muscle fibers. Under a microscope, cardiac muscle fibers look almost identical to skeletal muscle fibers. Okay? They have a very, very tightly organized, right, sarcomeres with actin and myosin. They appear striated and striped. They look like skeletal muscle. Right? They have very few central nuclei. Right? So these big cells, they have multiple nuclei, but they're going to all be out on the outside. One of the things that makes cardiac muscle different than skeletal muscle is the amount of mitochondria in it. Skeletal muscle, the cytoplasmic volume is maybe 3 or 4 to maybe 5 or 6% of its cytoplasmic volume contains mitochondria. In cardiac muscle, it may be up to 40% of the cytoplasmic volume is made up of mitochondria. Okay? What would that make cardiac muscle really good at doing if it has lots and lots and lots of mitochondria? Anybody know? Anybody want to guess? Portia. I'm sorry? Repair, okay. Okay. It's really good at using oxygen. Then someone over here contracting, okay. So think about this, okay? I won't fix it. Think about how old you are. I won't ask anybody for your actual age, okay? I'll use my own. I am 42, as my mother would say, going on 43 because my birthday's in May. So I'm almost 43 years old, all right? My heart has been beating for a little more than 43 years consecutively, okay? Can you imagine a scenario whereby you were doing a squat every second for the entirety of your life up to this point. Can you imagine being able to do that? Or could you imagine doing a curl? Like I'm just sitting here doing this over and over and over again for my entire life. Can you imagine how tired your arm would be? Okay? That seems crazy. And yet your heart does it, not a problem. Okay? Not a problem. Why? Because it has a huge amount of mitochondria. The heart has a tremendous ability to make ATP, which can be used for muscle contractions without having any sort of metabolic byproducts that are going to get built up. Okay? So cardiac muscle is really good at aerobic metabolism. Therefore, it has lots of energy available so that it can contract over and over and over again without fatigue. Okay? And that's a good thing because it keeps us alive. Okay? But that makes it different than skeletal muscle. In addition to having more mitochondria, because it has so many mitochondria, it can use a huge amount of oxygen to make ATP. So it needs lots and lots and lots of capillaries. I can't remember if I have a picture in here, but in anatomy class, did you guys get to visualize that all of the capillaries that are coming off of the coronary arteries that are kind of surrounding the heart at all? You guys ever seen any pictures of that or anything? You did more large scale. So the heart is a very, very vascular tissue. It has this big network of coronary arteries and arterioles and lots of capillaries. There's more capillaries in cardiac muscle than you have in any sort of skeletal muscle. So you bring lots of oxygen to the heart and it can use lots of it. The other piece that I want you to know that makes cardiac muscle unique from skeletal muscle are these three structures here: desmosomes, gap junctions, and something called an intercalated disc. Okay? So these structures are going to do two things. First, the intercalated disc is the location where the end of one cardiac muscle fiber makes contact with an adjacent cardiac muscle fiber. Okay? At the intercalated disc is where the desmosomes occur and the gap junctions occur. So I have one cardiac muscle fiber, and I have another one that's right up here next to it, the place where they make contact. That's the intercalated disc. Desmosomes are like clamps, basically. Desmosomes are specialized structures that hold one cardiac muscle fiber very, very tightly to an adjacent cardiac muscle fiber. Okay? So it's like you're holding hands with your neighbor really, really tight. It's hard to pull those apart. A gap junction is, at its most basic, it's just a hole. Okay? A gap junction is a pore through which ions can pass from one cardiac muscle fiber to the next cardiac muscle fiber. Okay? Having this particular structure is really important for the function of how we tell cardiac muscle fibers to contract. Okay? These structures don't exist in skeletal muscle because skeletal muscle gets told to contract by the nervous system, right? You have motor neurons, and then you have neuromuscular junctions and things where the brain signals down and says skeletal muscle contract. Cardiac muscle tissue is very different. It gets told to contract by an adjacent cardiac muscle fiber. Okay? So we start contractions at the SA node, this collection of nerves. It goes and it fires, and then one cardiac muscle fiber gets depolarized, and then it depolarizes the adjacent one, and so on and so on and so on. Okay? So without these individual structures holding them tightly together and having pores through which ions and things can move, then the way we tell the heart to contract and therefore to beat does not work for us. Okay? So again, this is the structure of cardiac muscle is going to help impart the function of cardiac muscle. Its structure is different than skeletal muscle because the way we tell it to contract is different than the way we tell skeletal muscle to contract. Okay? All right. So we'll talk about the cardiac conduction system, and then I'll shut up for the day because I'm sure y'all are tired. Okay? Let's do a fun exercise, shall we? Okay? Everybody, do this. Look at me. Everybody do this. Okay? Here's what I want you to do. Okay? Put your right arm out and wiggle your finger. Okay? Now back in here. Okay? Left arm out. Wiggle your fingers. Okay? This is voluntary control of skeletal muscle movement. Now, make your heart stop beating. Go. Y'all do it? What about this? Make your heart beat faster. Can you make it beat faster? Some of y'all are like, I don't know, can I? Do you want me to make someone's heart beat faster? I can do that, right? That we can do. I can say things like, Samantha, do you want to stand up on your chair and sing us a song? Probably to make her heart beat faster. I can tell all of you we're about to do a series of squats, and your heart rate immediately goes up, right? No voluntary control of heart rate. You don't have any conscious brain level control of how fast or slow your heart is beating, which is probably good. Can you again imagine if you had to think about beat, beat, beat all day, every day? You'd never get anything else done, okay? So cardiac muscle has something that's called autoconduction. There's no brain control of this. Your heart spontaneously contracts all on its own because of the cardiac conduction system. It has an intrinsic firing rate of about 72 beats per minute. If nothing else was going on, we just put you guys like in a coma, it would go at about 72 beats per minute. Okay? So the cardiac conduction system is made up of 4 components, all of which are kind of specialized nervous system tissue that helps us begin and then move action potentials in the heart to get it to contract in the way that we want. Okay? All cardiac contractions begin under normal, healthy circumstances at the SA node, the sinoatrial node. It is located in the top of the right atria here, right? Sinoatrial node. It's a collection of nerve fibers, and in those nerve fibers, they have what are called leaky sodium channels. So it leaks sodium in, which means it's going to reach threshold and depolarize over some predictable period of time, which for you guys is about every 0.8 seconds with nothing else going on. Okay? SA node fires, that depolarizes the surrounding skeletal or the surrounding cardiac muscle. They transmit that signal down through the adjacent fibers. It then reaches what's called the AV node or the atrioventricular node, which is going to exist here in the wall of the right atria, kind of very near the junction here with the left atria and the right ventricle. That's going to help us move our impulse into the ventricles, okay? And it does so by going down what's called the AV bundle. So nerve bundle, then we have nerve fibers that run down the septum. This is called the AV bundle or the bundle of His, okay? It moves it down, and then it's going to reach the apex of the heart, and it's going to turn and move up, and then branch off into what we call Purkinje fibers. And the point of all of this is that these nerve bundles and nerve fibers here transmit the action potential faster than it can move across the surface of cardiac muscle. And so by moving it down, it begins the contraction of the ventricles from the bottom, and it squeezes upwards from the bottom. So it gets contraction here first, and then it moves its way up, because remember, we will note that blood leaves both the left and right ventricle out the top, right? It leaves coming out of the top, so we're going to force it up so that it can go off to the lungs or go out into systemic circulation. Okay? That's what's happening. I assume you guys have seen that part of things before. Right? I got that in the anatomy and physics. I talked about cardiac conduction system. Unfortunately, I do want you guys to know this in detail. Where does the signal begin? How does it move from one thing to the next? Where are each of these things located relative to our four chambers of the heart? Okay? I do want you to know that because it's really important. Okay, we will stop here for today. Email me, 1, your assignment from class, 2, your grip strength and your push-ups and sit-up stuff. I need that by Friday. And then if you've written something, make sure you leave that for me. I think that's going to be it. Monday, I'll let you guys know on Monday when we're going to move the test. Probably going to be on Wednesday the 10th, but I will let you guys know on Monday. Okay? Have a good weekend. Make good choices.